Russia stood on the edge of a dark transformation. The royal family was fragile, the people enraged, revolution imminent. And in the chaos, a figure rose who chilled the soul. Grigori Rasputin. Neither a monk nor an ordinary man. Some called him a saint, others a demon, but no one could ignore him. This is the story of a man written in shadow. Rasputin's tale is not just about a man, it's about the fall of an empire. Without him, neither the Tsar, the revolution, nor fate can be fully understood. In this video, we'll enter a world where facts blur with legends. If you're ready, don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. Let's begin. Grigori Yefimovich Rasputin, a peasant boy who became the confidant of an empire. What set him apart was not just his prophecies, but a life woven with women, cults, assassins, and miracles of survival. At the end of this tale, there's a river, and a body still submerged in mystery. In 1869, in one of Russia's most remote villages, Pokrovskoye, born in the frozen steppes, this child stood at the edge of an ordinary life. His father was a drunk village coachman, his mother a quiet, weary woman. But Grigori was unlike other children. No one could hold his gaze for long. At a young age, Rasputin began acting strangely, sometimes disappearing for days, sometimes speaking with animals. Villagers whispered he could see sin with his eyes. Those he confronted often faced misfortune. He was feared, yet never cast out. Maybe that was his first true power. Grigori never went to school. He learned to read and write much later by himself. But his memory was extraordinary. He could repeat anything he heard without forgetting. He recited prayers by heart, learning the Bible just by listening. He hungered for knowledge, but not for rules. In his youth, he was accused of stealing livestock. Some called him a liar, others claimed he had made a pact with the devil. But those who tried to harm him often met ill fate. He became untouchable in the village. No longer a boy, he was now an omen. As a teenager, rumors grew about Rasputin's supernatural abilities. People said he sensed illness and saw visions in his dreams. Some claimed his touch could heal. Even the church hesitated to judge him. They gave him a name, Stranik, the wandering spirit. These lonely years in the village shaped Rasputin's soul, torn between faith and temptation, seeking power but bound to no one. He hadn't reached the palace yet, but darkness had already reached him, and he never wanted to leave it. Young Rasputin was restless. Family, work, and faith couldn't fill the void inside him. He longed to leave the village, without knowing why. His dreams were vivid, some divine, some drenched in blood. He could no longer sit still. He felt he had to go. One of Rasputin's life-changing moments came through marriage. He wed Praskovya and had 3 children, yet the voice within never went silent. Though devoted to his family, something else kept pulling him. To remain in the village felt like a kind of death. In his late 20s, Rasputin suddenly abandoned everything. He set off in search of a mystical awakening. He visited monasteries, spoke with monks, and sought solitude. He often went without food, but claimed he was never hungry. The further he left the world behind, the closer he felt to himself. During this journey, he encountered the Klists, a secretive sect. Their belief to sin in order to purge sin. It left a lasting mark on him. Cleansing through indulgence. Rasputin felt both the darkness and the seduction of this idea. Prayers became physical, and the body met the soul. Rasputin wasn't a monk, but he was no longer the same man. He experienced his own form of enlightenment. He had made peace with the darkness inside. He chose to live outside all systems. And that choice would lead him directly to the most powerful palace in Russia. When Rasputin returned to his village, he was no longer the same man. There were deep lines on his face and intensity in his eyes. The villagers saw his return as a sign. More and more people came to him for advice. Some sought healing. Others just wanted to touch him. His small hut quietly turned into a center of faith. His name spread from one village to another, crossing Siberia's frozen paths. Women began to see him as a savior. Some claimed they witnessed miracles in his presence. The blind prayed. The sick whispered his name in hope. People walked miles just to reach his door. Rasputin was no longer just a peasant. He was becoming a living legend. But fame brought fear and suspicion. Clergy accused him of working with dark forces. His idea of sinful cleansing was seen as blasphemy. Rumors about his past with secret sects spread quickly. Yet Rasputin never defended himself. He believed in one thing: God didn't need a holy class to speak. He spoke through those who truly listened. His relationships with women caused the most controversy. To him, the body was a door to the soul. Some women described their time with him as healing, others as disturbing. Whispers of spiritual unions started circulating among the people. But for Rasputin, faith was not separate from the flesh. It was expressed through it. They called him a starets, a spiritual leader of the people. But Rasputin cared little for titles. His goal was greater: to reshape destiny itself. He wanted to bend systems through belief, and the silent revolution he began in his village would soon echo through the Tsar's palace halls. Some saw him as a prophet, others as the devil, but no one could ignore him. His presence created a crack in the soul of Russia. People either prayed for him or cursed his name. And yet, they all asked the same question: was this man a miracle, or the very disaster he seemed to foretell? In 1903, Rasputin took his first step into St. Petersburg. With worn clothes, he looked like a stranger to the royal city, but when he spoke, people listened. Priests, scholars, even noble women grew curious. He looked like a peasant, but his words came from another world. Soon he became a mystical name whispered across the capital. Rasputin's greatest power was reading people through their eyes. He sensed weaknesses and spoke exactly what they needed to hear. His words were simple but magnetic. Noble women especially were drawn to his calming voice. Some saw him as a prophet. Others developed a spiritual dependence. Rasputin began weaving himself into the minds of the elite. High-ranking clergy wanted to meet him as well. His knowledge came without formal study, without memorized scriptures. That both impressed and terrified them. Some tried to test him, but his responses were always striking. He embodied a state of knowing without learning, and that made his spiritual authority even stronger in their eyes. Whispers of Rasputin echoed through royal circles. They called him the man who influences without touching, the bare voice of God, the unseen guide. He received invitation after invitation, but Rasputin never rushed into anything. He was building his rise slowly, like a spider spinning a perfect web. One day, Grand Duchess Militsa, cousin of the Tsar, met Rasputin. She was deeply moved. She recommended him to the royal family. At last, the gates began to open. Rasputin had taken his first step toward the highest power in Russia. And from that moment on, there would be no turning back for anyone involved. Rasputin never chased power. Power chased him. From a simple peasant to a royal confidant, his journey became irreversible. In those early meetings, few noticed the shift, but quietly, Russia's fate was beginning to reshape itself on the lips of a bearded, silent man. Tsar Nicholas II's only son, Alexei, was born with hemophilia. Even a small fall could be fatal. Doctors were helpless. Hope was fading. In that desperation, Rasputin was secretly brought to the palace. He wasn't a doctor, yet they treated him like one. When Empress Alexandra saw him, she felt for the first time in years a chance for salvation. Rasputin sat beside Alexei. He gave no medicine, didn't even touch him. He simply prayed, watching over him until dawn. And by morning, the bleeding stopped. The doctors were stunned. The Empress believed. From that day forward, Rasputin wasn't just a guest. He was family. To Alexandra, Rasputin was a miracle sent by God. She called him "my father" and sought his guidance in all matters. Even the Tsar gradually fell under his influence. Whispers began spreading through the palace. But to the Empress, only one thing mattered: her son. And the man who saved him was Rasputin. The royal court disliked Rasputin. He looked unrefined, spoke bluntly, and showed no manners. But under Alexandra's protection, he was untouchable. Anyone who criticized him found themselves isolated. Rasputin was no longer a spiritual figure. He had become an invisible force at the very center of power. Rasputin's name began appearing alongside political decisions. Appointments, dismissals, exiles, all bore his shadow. The Empress refused to act without consulting him. While the Tsar focused on war, Rasputin filled the vacuum left inside the palace. And that presence deeply unsettled both the nobles and the nation. Once a wanderer in remote villages, Rasputin now lived at the empire's heart. Some still saw him as holy. Others believed a devil walked among royals. But one thing was certain: without Rasputin, Alexandra would fall. And if the Empress fell, so would Russia itself. Rasputin's power in the palace grew stronger every day. But with power came rumors, countless and dark. Some claimed they saw him praying with the Empress late at night. Others whispered the prayers turned into something else. His shadow slipped silently into every room. No one openly opposed him, but everyone talked about him. Quietly, nervously, constantly. The press no longer held back. Caricatures and headlines flooded the newspapers. The monk who controls the Tsar, the holy seducer. The public was divided. Some mocked him, others cursed those who followed him. But there was one shared belief: this man had gone too far, and no one, not even the royal family, seemed able to stop him. Rasputin didn't fear criticism. Some said he fed on it. The more enemies he had, the tighter his circle became. Those who defended him weren't just believers, they were loyal disciples. When Rasputin spoke, people listened. When he was silent, people guessed. His silence echoed louder than any sermon ever could. Every new court member was introduced to Rasputin first. Some kissed his hands, others begged for time alone with him. Women left his room in tears, while men watched him with suspicion. But Rasputin greeted everyone the same way: calm, distant, as if he already knew everything. That presence, chilling and magnetic, cast a spell across the palace. Many believed Rasputin was poisoning the palace from within. He didn't sign laws, but he shaped decisions. Nothing felt complete until his name was spoken. No command was given without second thoughts. This uncertainty paralyzed the empire's core. It was as if one man's silence could shake the entire throne. Rasputin's influence wasn't just spiritual anymore, it was psychological. Some accused him of hypnosis, others claimed he radiated demonic energy. But Rasputin did only one thing: he watched. And that watchful gaze left people alone with their reflection. A reflection they could no longer bear to see. Rasputin was no longer just controversial. He was a direct threat. His closeness to the royal family alarmed even military generals. Rumors about women and secret rituals outraged the public. There was only one solution left: kill him. And in 1914, the first blade came not from a soldier, but from a woman. The knife cut deep, driven by fury. But Rasputin didn't die. He hovered between life and death for days. Then, he survived. After that, people called him Immortal. He was no longer just a man. He had become bulletproof folklore, a living myth. His wounds healed, but the stories spread faster. People called him a vampire, a sorcerer, a devil. The royal court became a national joke, and Rasputin, he didn't retreat. He drank more, spoke more openly, and claimed that through sin, he could feel closer to God. His scandals were no longer containable. Inappropriate letters to women, midnight visits to the palace, the exile of his enemies, they all fueled the fire. Officials tried to silence him by silence, but the less they spoke his name, the louder his legend grew. Rasputin became more powerful with every whisper. Still, the palace protected him. Alexandra believed he was sacred. While the people starved, Rasputin dined like a king. This gap between palace and people became the spark of a rising storm. Generals came to one conclusion: if Rasputin lived, the empire would not. Plots were no longer secret. Assassination plans were openly discussed. Some nobles swore an oath to end him. Yet Rasputin kept smiling, as if he knew everything, as if he could sense the moment. He believed even his own death was part of a divine prophecy. By 1916, Rasputin's name was tied to one word: death. His connection to the Empress made him untouchable, but the nobility had had enough. Secret meetings were held. Volunteers for assassination were quietly recruited. They all agreed Russia would not recover until Rasputin was gone. And one man finally stepped forward: Prince Felix Yusupov. Felix Yusupov was young, wealthy, and ambitious, but he carried a deep hatred for Rasputin. He believed Rasputin had corrupted the empire from within. His plan was simple: invite him to his palace, start with poison, finish with bullets. But killing Rasputin would not be easy. He was, after all, a man who defied fate more than once. The plot unfolded in silence. Yusupov sent warm invitations, gaining Rasputin's trust. Others provided the wine and the bullets. The time, the place, the method. Everything was ready. But none expected an easy ending. Rasputin had escaped death before. If he survived again, their failure would be eternal. And so would his power. Only one person sensed the storm coming: Empress Alexandra. She was gripped by a fear she couldn't explain. She wrote letters, whispered prayers. But Rasputin told her, "You cannot stand against fate." That night, she prayed harder than ever. But no one heard her. The night was no longer hers. It belonged to shadows. Rasputin seemed aware of it all. He walked alone to Yusupov's mansion. Wearing a dark coat, his eyes calm, almost distant. There are no photos of that moment, only words. Witnesses said he looked like a man marching to his own funeral, and that he knew he would not return. The plan was set. The night had begun. The table was arranged, the poison prepared, the gun loaded. Yusupov opened the door, and fate stepped inside. The room wasn't filled with people. It was filled with fear, revenge, and belief. Rasputin's final night had started, and history would remember it in blood. On the night of December 30th, 1916, Rasputin entered Yusupov's palace. The house was warm, the table full, wine glass waiting, but everything was prepared for death. Rasputin accepted the invitation and sat. Yusupov spoke. Rasputin listened in silence. That night, God was never mentioned, because death was already seated among them. Poisoned cakes were served. Rasputin ate. Nothing happened. Yusupov panicked. A second slice. Still nothing. Rasputin drank wine, smiled. They locked eyes. Yusupov left the room, returned with a gun. He fired. A bullet hit Rasputin's chest. He fell. But the silence didn't last. Rasputin moved. He was not finished. He didn't die. He stood, walked toward the door. Another assassin was called in. More shots were fired. Rasputin collapsed, but he was still breathing. A final bullet was fired into his head. His body stilled. But minds raced. How many times had this man died and come back? Who was he, really? They wrapped his body in a rug, carried it through the cold night, to the river. The water would take him. But by morning, the body returned. It washed ashore. An autopsy showed water in his lungs, meaning he didn't die from bullets. He drowned. And in drowning, he became something even greater, a legend. Rasputin's death split Russia in two. Some said finally, others felt fear. Because his final prophecy echoed still. If I die, you will fall within months. And months later, the Romanovs were gone. The empire collapsed. When Rasputin fell silent, history began to speak. That night, not just a man died. An era ended. An empire trembled. And all that remained, a river, a shadow, and one lingering question. Who was Rasputin? A saint? A monster? Or merely a reflection of the darkness we try to hide? Rasputin died, but his story was just beginning. Newspapers still printed his name. People whispered his legend in the streets. To some, he was the final sin of Imperial Russia. To others, a cursed symbol that triggered revolution. And through it all, one question echoed. What did he really do? And how much of it did we invent ourselves? Some claimed he had hypnotic powers, others said he was simply a master manipulator. Psychologists debated his control over the human mind, but no one could prove anything. Because Rasputin lived in the space between fact and fiction, he wasn't fully real, and he was never fully myth either. He existed in the blur where truth loses its edges. Over time, Rasputin became less a man and more a symbol. He appeared in novels, songs, and films, sometimes a monster, sometimes a tragic sage. No longer one identity, but a canvas for fear, fascination, and power. He became a shadow that each era could reshape to match its own darkness. Historians still debate him. There are records, there are witnesses, but they all feel incomplete. Because Rasputin's real influence was never in what he did, it was in what he left behind. A void, a question mark. He wasn't remembered because we understood him, but because we didn't. To this day, people still ask, who was Rasputin? A peasant? A fraud? Or a true messenger of fate? Maybe the truth lies in all of them, maybe in none. But one thing is certain. There was a man, and that man brought an empire quietly to its knees. Grigori Rasputin. His name still echoes with fear, awe, and mystery. He wasn't just a man of his time. He was the mirror of our darkness. Each era creates its own Rasputin. So tell me, who was he to you? A saint? A madman? Or a ghost history couldn't bury? Share your thoughts in the comments, like the video, and subscribe for more stories like this.